Hi everyone, welcome to Tech Days. This is the last day, and this is the track 2 where the topic will be data intelligence, and the moderator will be Rajiv Sharma, our Chief Solution Officer, and Moshe is also here. Over to you, Rajiv.
Thank you, Shakti. Welcome everyone for day 3 of track 2. As Shakti mentioned, the theme of track 2 today is data intelligence. We have 4 interesting papers being presented to us today. The first one being the paper by Elizier Ramm on Devops for databases, database continuous delivery done right. Elizier he's part of our Israel Development Center, IDEC Innovation Center. He is a DevOps team leader with our tool integration team for Barclays and corporate banking. And his span of work covers overseeing more than 20,000 servers. He's been with Ness since 2010 and has over 20 years of experience in handling enterprise systems management. And prior to joining Ness, he was in the telecom industry at a senior position. Over to you, Elizier, for your presentation.
Okay. Welcome everybody. I hope you've made, okay. So if there's any technical problems, let me know. Okay, so welcome. Thank you very much for inviting me and having me here at the Tech Days event.
You have to share your screen. You have to share your screen.
Sorry, 1 second. I thought they did it. 1 second. Share screen. Okay. Okay, now you see it?
Yes, sorry,
okay. Sorry about that. Little stage right there. Okay, so welcome. Thank you very much. I'll skip some of the stuff because of Rajiv's excellent introduction. But like there is a Talmudic dictum of giving credit to one's host. So just as part of a few words about the Israel Development and Engineering Center, we're located in Tel Aviv with over 50 plus developers. Our primary customer is Barclays Bank, and we create bespoke and custom solutions for them in various areas like Hadoop, big data, and other areas for compliance and regulations. One of our big advantages here is our ability to leverage our location with all the development and innovation that goes on here in Israel. We're close to the vendors. We tend to get faster results and more insights, and we get concessions from the vendor that, by working with them directly that you don't usually get when you're going to a big sales chain. If anybody's watching out there in the IDEC, hello. So the topic is DevOps for database. I know DevOps was already discussed a little bit here and some of the previous tracks, but database is something that's always been kind of left out of the picture, left out of the DevOps chain, and we're going to talk about that today. The vendor of choice is a product called DB Maestro. DB Maestro does exactly that, DevOps for databases and continuous delivery and continuous integration. It works primarily with Oracle and MySQL. All right, so just for a quick review, why are we here? Right, some of the challenges that are faced by organizations who are developing software, whether internally or that's their product. Downtime has a cost of over $2 billion a year. Infrastructure failure can cost over $1 million a year. Deployments monthly are growing at a rate of 2 times. By using DevOps, we could accelerate delivery by 20%. We could also factor in compliance and audit enforcement, right, and risk reputational damage. When you work with the bank, those last 2 parts are actually more important than anything else, and they lead to large fines if you don't. So some people kind of take all this stuff kind of flippantly and say it's very nice, but when you have just those 2 factors involved, it already makes it worthwhile to look into a new way of working. What does DevOps bring? DevOps allows us to reduce critical application downtime, right, by using set procedures. All right, these procedures can take into account automatic compliance factors by making sure what gets done, what doesn't get done. When things work via automation, it's easier to get more done and eliminate human error. And also security can take into account and make sure that you know in advance what's going to happen, and as well as afterwards knowing who ran what and when. Okay, our vendor is DB Maestro, and this might be the place to stop and think and say, well, if I've got, you know, a Redgate, or if I've got other tools in my tool set, right, why would I be even coming to a lecture about DB Maestro? And yet another product, how am I going to sell that? You know, why do I need to integrate that? But research has shown that IT organizations that have tried to customize their current tools to meet DevOps practices have a failure rate of over 80%, thus making tool replacement and addition a critical requirement. Okay, whenever the average cost percentage per year of a single application's development, testing, deployment, and operations lifestyle, which is considered wasteful, is 25%. So that means out of every budget, right, only 75% is being utilized to its maximization to create your end product to reach your goal, whereas 25% of your budget, right, is being wasted. So in today's, you know, budget hungry and money hungry, you know, managers, right, every penny counts, and the ability to save 25% is an amazing thing. Okay, everybody's talking, right? I'm sure everybody's heard CI, CD, Jenkins, all that kind of stuff, right? Everybody wants to do it. Now, in the classic software development field, it's a little bit easier, you know, it's a little bit more well implemented at 61%. But when you factor in databases, so it's 30%, and even that 30% is mostly manual implementation. 51% want to do something, but they don't know how to do something. Maybe they're waiting for the outcome of this talk. And 90% haven't even factored it in yet. So even within that 30%, only 13% are actually doing fully basic continuous delivery practices for the database. So that's 87% of people who really want to hear the results of this talk, I think. If we look at what the problem is, especially when we talk about databases, so it's very challenging to do manual source control when you factor in all the database scripts, static deployment code overrides, and configuration drifts. We're going to talk a lot about that in various slides, where you have a situation where you've got, you know, various sides, various people putting input into a database, and it's very, very hard to track and to nail down one version. What version is the database holding at? Dynamic deployment tools are unaware of version control, so, you know, they just kind of shoot everything out. There's, you know, kind of like the steamroller effect for getting things out. Again, when you have no release automation, there's nothing to tell it. You can't put business logic in to when to stop the line because it's not aware of what should be on the other side, what shouldn't be on the side, right? And you need to have conflict awareness. Okay, so this is how things kind of happen today. We check out a script. We modify that script, right, because this is what we think we need, right? We upload it to the database, right? We compile it into the database. We debug the script usually in the database, right? So now everything is working fine. We then go back and we get the updated script back from the database, so we pull it down, and then we check it in, right? But we have to hope and pray that no one else has been working on the database in the meantime while we're doing this cycle, and we have to hope that on the other side there's not the DBA who's making emergency changes or hot fixes in the middle of the night, right, to that. So the fact that when you go roll out now to production, you don't know that the script in the database that you had worked against, right, are still relevant. So version control is out of sync from the database and cannot act as a single source of truth because we don't know what happened afterwards. Okay, so here's a situation. So you've got to compare and sync. So we're going to compare and we're going to, right? So in this case, on the source, we've got a create index field, you know, lines to create an index in the target database. Now, if we just say, okay, well, there's something that's in the source, it's not in the target, shoot it over. But the truth is to say, we don't really know that maybe it was already there once, right? And there was a reason why the DBA took it out. Maybe by putting that index in, it slowed performance, and he dropped it. There's no way to find out that when you did the deploy, right, was it there, was it not there, and only removed later, right? So we don't know. We have to check the index, right? So here's another case, right, where in the source, the index was dropped, right? But in the target, the index is there. So if you just shoot over the source automatically, right, you're going to overwrite your index, and you're going to lose the value that the index provided. So you wouldn't want to just based on a compare and sync, just shoot things over. Okay, and we see in this little target over here that we're always looking for the source versus the target. The source is your developers, the target is your database. Right, so a compare and sync tool is unaware of any changes that occurred before the time it ran, right, because it has no baseline to work with, it has no labels to work with, it has no knowledge of changes that took place at the target environment, meaning on the other side of the database, which means changes the DBA might have made, doesn't leverage version control for more information, it's unable to deal with conflicts and merges between different teams, right, so sometimes you have different teams working on a database, different development teams, or working on different versions, and how to merge all those changes. It requires manual inspection to make sure that no mistakes are made, and it requires detailed knowledge regarding each change as part of the process. Okay, so if there's no automation, we fear automating problems into production, and it's a major risk. What kind of risk? How big a risk? We'll see. Okay, so I don't know where some slides went. Okay, so what the DB Maestro proposes is the following. You check out the object, everything within the database. You modify object in the database, you run your application tests, and you check in the object again, but everything within the database. Okay, here we could see what you use is your normal tools, Oracle SQL Developer, right? And the DB Maestro toolset is integrated in the existing toolset that a developer uses, right? And he has everything he needs to check in, compare, check out, look at labels, everything he needs. So, and we leverage version control knowledge into deployment decisions. Okay, so again, this is kind of like what I was talking about before. On the left side, you've got developers who have put in version 1.0. On the right side, you've got a guy, DBA, putting in the middle of the night an emergency fix. So at that point, you really don't know, right, what version am I running, right? Let's say something happens, right, you know, disaster recovery scenario, and you want to put in, okay, no problem, let's just shoot out version 1.0 again. Well, whatever emergency fixes were there are going to be lost because you don't have a baseline, you don't anywhere have a record of what was done on the other side. So over here is more on the left side is what we call the label, right, and when we include the emergency fixes, and then that becomes a baseline for the database, and then we're able to compare emergency fixes versus the baseline and versus the label. Okay, so therefore, so that's what we're going to see here. Let's just jump right to this pretty picture here. So if the source versus the baseline and the target versus the baseline, right, the target being the current database status, meaning including whatever actions the DBA might have made, right, then we do no action, right? If the source is different, right, from the baseline, right? So, and the target, though, is equivalent, right? The database has not changed since it was last deployed, so that's the change we want to deploy, right? If the source is different, right, but somewhere the DBA in the middle of the night put an emergency fix, so we need to protect the database because we don't want those fixes overridden, right? And then if everything is out of sync, right, so then we want to merge changes. We don't want to, you know, favor one over the other, right, but we want to merge changes. So in DB Maestro, this is what it would look like is where you have your development all the way on the left, you have your production is where your DBA might have made changes, and in the middle you have what's called the label or baseline, where that's your golden copy, right? That's the source, that's the database you thought you had in production, right? And you're able to create and see what's there. So if you have an index in the baseline in the previous version and no longer have it in dev, we should take it out of production or deploy change. But if no index is in the baseline and someone else added it to production, we should protect the new index on production, right? So here it's in production, right? So we don't want to move it over, right? We want to protect it, so we need to protect the target and make sure it doesn't overwrite the changes. So again, here in in what's called the structure conflict resolver, you could see the various things you might see in a DB Maestro screen of various changes to create a final script for uploading database changes, and it takes into account various areas that have changed, whether it's text, whether it's days, whether it's indexes and stuff like that. Okay, here's another interesting thing that DB Maestro does, and I can't say I know this feature 100% to the fact of how big it is, but there's what they call metadata, meaning if they cannot, this is not a backup and restore tool, that's for sure. I say that clearly, right? If you overwrote millions of credit card, records, user records, I can't help you, right? But what they call metadata, which is not only table structure, but it's also tables, let's say with states, like 52 states in the United States, or city names. I don't know exactly to what records, how many records they protect, but they could protect it as well. So if someone dropped a city name or added a city name or dropped a state or added a country or stuff like that, DB Maestro is aware, and it could tell, right, if that's been dropped, in production, in development, or whatever, and it could be, we could look at address that as well. So here's a very interesting thing. DB Maestro has what's called a continuous delivery pipeline builder, where it has a native plugin right directly into Jenkins, and you could kind of like design your integration path with different sources and into different databases, and that produces something that gets pushed to Jenkins with alerts, and it integrates back into the process. And then when it runs into the process, and we know that if there's a problem where we've chosen, previously to protect the baseline, to protect the target, so right away Jenkins will stop, the build will fail, and then at that point we need to go in and see and make a conscious decision what we want to do with the difference. For security and compliance as well, there's reporting to see who's been doing what, when, and where. And these reports and these changes could be very effective for security and compliance reasons. So basically the solution is database enforced source control, meaning the source control is not in a separate process, but within the database, right? We do database merge and build automation via Jenkins and the tools of DB Maestro, database release automation, and then that gives us also, it provides us enhanced security and regulation compliance. So that's the 4 value propositions of DB Maestro. DB Maestro works very well with existing CD continuous delivery tools, whether it's CI tools like Jenkins or Bamboo, whether it's file-based source control like Perforce or Git, all various IDEs, Visual Studio, Oracle SQL Developer. They work well with Jira to manage tickets and everything like that, so you could see that a change was made as a result of a ticket and work together there. And that's that. I'm here at Ness with the IDEC, if anybody has any questions or would like to follow up. And that's that. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to take. I hope I was clear. That's that.
Thank you, Elizier. I hope I get your name right.
Yeah. Don't worry about it.
See any. I don't see any questions, but if somebody has a question, we have time for them. So you can shoot me the questions in the chat window, and I can ask them to Elizier.
Elizier, hi. This is Moshe.
Yeah.
Is there a performance penalty for using this tool, or it's all because the checkout and check-in are happening not in real time? There's no performance penalty.
That's correct. Yeah, it happens on like the development level. So the database never gets a hit, and the metadata is stored in DB Maestro's own database that sits between you, the developer, and the production database. So it doesn't affect anything on your production database.
Elizier, one question from my side. So this is the problem for Devops we are currently facing, where we are trying to automate integration and deployment for a ETL-driven project for one of our key customers. Now, the QA is a separate team, the release is a separate team, The devs are a separate team. They don't talk to one another, and everything is practically manual, including the challenges with data refresh. That having the production copy in the dev and QA environment, that takes time as well. So where do you think is the best place to start? And what do you mean by DevOps in a data environment? Does it mean agile, or what is DevOps in a data environment? It is not about the tools, right? It is about the culture. So where is the problem?
The problem is that the more you try to automate, the database is a very difficult piece of the process to automate, because you know, not everybody always has access to the production. Like you said, production. You can't see what's always going on the other side. There's different teams working on the database. Let's say primarily you have your developers on one side, you've got your production DBAs on the other side. They don't talk, they don't get together. You have also a situation, let's say we have at the bank, where the developers cannot have no visibility into the database. They push their scripts, they get rejected back from the production side. They have no idea. By getting a view into whatever and resolving any mergers and conflicts that they know about in advance, that when they go to production, they get their changes approved on the first time, and it's not this endless cycle of, you know, submit change, be rejected, submit again, be rejected. So it improves performance by quite a bit, and it saves up to 25% of your budget. And here also in QA and everything like that, so it gives you an ability to quickly look into your version of the database versus it also gives you a version, you know what, where it's good for QA, because you could have the developers locked in on one version, and they could say, make a label version 1.0, right? They pass that over to QA, and QA starts changing. It starts checking. Meanwhile, development is working towards the 2.0 version. Now, let's say QA comes up with a problem in the 1.0 version. It gives them an ability to get a view into the database, right, of what the 1.0 version looked like easily, without, you know, downgrading the database, pulling all sorts of scripts from different places, and trying to rerun it and trying to create the 1.0 database, or trying to restore the database from backup onto a, you know, brand new database. So it gives you a very dynamic picture in terms of working with QA and developers, where developers can go forward and keep on changing things to the database, where QA, when they need them to stop and say, wait, take a look back.